Welcome to the Standards Michigan Weekly Focus Teleconference, where our doors open to discuss the week's work, but also we expand upon the underlying philosophy and strategy that guides that work. Today, the door is open from the University of Michigan Ross Athletic Academic Center on the athletic campus. We schedule these open teleconferences at a time when the work week winds down and when our more reflective discussions do not crowd our production calendars, what we do to write code and get votes in the middle part of the week. As Mike likes to say, writing code and getting votes is what we do to pay the rent. We always prefer that these Friday teleconferences be more of a discussion than a lecture, but absent any real-time participants, we always have a focus topic chosen from the stream of standards action that we follow on a nearly hourly basis. We do post almost all of them on our YouTube channel. We get about 25 views per week, enough, we think, to meet an obligation to be open, transparent, and accessible. Mike has picked sports equipment and athletic facility standards as our focus topic.
Thanks very much, Christine. In our first frame here, I've tried to group the organizations that are involved in standards development for athletic equipment and facilities into three areas here. These three associations here, you probably heard of the NCAA. You might not have heard that there is another organization called the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. There's also a high school association of high school athletes. These organizations deal principally with the academic and the eligibility. They'll also deal with things like having, how often they can practice. And in the case of the NCAA, I think I personally have used their standards for lighting television events. So there are some requirements that they make, and so they deal principally with the sport itself. Now, over here we have the organizations that are dealing with the facility itself. And you'll look at the International Code Council. They're responsible for the buildings, how the buildings are built, how many people are allowed to get in there. They're essentially theaters in a way. I mention that because this other organization called the Professional Lighting and Acoustic Association deals with events, special events. I think they're principally theater, but to the degree maybe you don't agree with, athletics is theater, and you're starting to see the use of Michigan Stadium, for example, being used for a lot of events. So there's a lot of crossover. When you have large audiences, you need that kind of a facility. Obviously, you want them to be fire safe. You want to get people out, even people in safely, and this is the leading name in that one. I think what has received a lot of attention, and this one where Dennis was drilling down this summer, was the National Operating Committee on Standards for Athletic Equipment, and they deal with the equipment itself. In a moment, we're going to let Mike Oliver from NOCSE speak, but all of the equipment, these organizations over here will likely make a requirement that that all equipment that the students are using be NOCSE standards. I believe there is another organization that's getting in this space. We didn't have time to research them at all, but NOCSE seems to be the leading name and the most respected voice at the moment on athletic equipment standards. Now specifically, ASTM, however, is in this space, and when Dennis gets back, my colleague who's researched this, you'll come to understand that ASTM has a very large role in making sure that the materials and the design of helmets are appropriate for the purpose. ASTM, as I mentioned on the blog post for this week, meet twice a year, and Dennis's research says that ASTM, this particular group, and I guess I would probably want to get to our website here to see just exactly where that is. Excuse me if you don't want to bear with me for a moment here. I'd like to get and pull up our web page on this particular issue, and I believe it's the meeting, they meet twice, as we say here, we meet twice a year, and we continue to make the point that it's generally not the organization or the party that the final fiduciary that is engaged in the development of these standards. That doesn't mean it's such a bad thing. Final fiduciaries are also interested in safety, but it tends to be dominated by voices that are either teaching. There's a lot of teaching that goes on in standards. There's a lot of advocacy for particular products, salesmanship. Obviously, insurance companies want to bring their interest to bear because they want to pay out fewer premiums or fewer claims for unfortunate events. So ASTM has a central role in making sure that the equipment meets a material and a strength specification that everyone agrees upon. You'll see, Mike, if you go back to a couple of our coverages on this, and you can go back and search on our website for this, we went into some detail about how NOCSE actually specifies the safety requirements and enforces them, and I think it's very interesting. So I'm going to let Mike tell that story himself here, but I'd just like to say, oh, one other thing, the CSA group, they're involved. This is the former Canadian Standards Association. They're all groups now. They're all international. They're all groups, and so they've reformulated themselves to meet the market conditions. So the Canadian Standards Association, it still has the same acronym, is the Canadian variant of this. And Canadian football is a little bit different. The Canadians have a different approach to safety, and that's you can learn more about that on our website where we dealt with CSA group standards. Let's see, I'm kind of tempted to tell you that we have CSA group. So those of our viewers here, if you're interested in a particular keyword, that's right. So this is what you need to do. And that's how you can find out more about CSA. That's how our search bar works. Okay, let's get ourselves over to Mr. Let me stop talking and let's Mr. Oliver. Mr. Oliver is their leading voice. He's an attorney, and he may well be an athlete, but he spent some time with us. We're very grateful for that. He offered to spend more time with us in the future, but not on a Friday afternoon in front of a football game. Here we go, Mike.
This is a Blend Extra. Well, summer is winding down and kids are headed back to football practice. So how much does your athlete know about concussions and the importance of good helmets? Mike Oliver is the Executive Director and General Counsel for the National Operating Committee on Standards for Athletic Equipment. Good afternoon to you, Mike.
Good afternoon, Tiffany. Thanks for letting me come on.
Absolutely. I think this is a very important topic of discussion that parents are involved in, coaches, athletes alike. How important is the helmet when we start talking about school football and athletics and concussion prevention?
Well, it's certainly important. Having a helmet is vital to protecting your head in the course of a football game. But we don't think it's necessarily the most important, particularly when it comes to concussions. We think changing the way you play the game, avoiding the hits. In fact, the more times you don't need to use your helmet, probably the better off you are in the course of a practice or a game. So making sure that you don't hit with the head intentionally, make sure you avoid those avoidable hits. Those are probably more important than actually the helmet that you wear, although you can't avoid or can't abandon one for the other.
What should parents look at when they're thinking of helmets or choosing them?
Well, the first thing you need to do is look at fit. If they're going to be buying a helmet as opposed to just getting a helmet handed to them from the school or the club, if they're buying one, they want to make sure the helmet fits. I would sort of not pay attention to brands and models necessarily, but I would look at how does the helmet fit and try them on. I think parents ought to go to manufacturers' websites ahead of time and look at fitting instructions, watch the videos, download the printed material, understand what's involved in making sure a helmet fits correctly. Because different models, different brands fit kids differently. Everybody's head's shaped a little bit differently. Make sure it fits, and once you've got it and you've properly fitted it, make sure it continues to fit. Make sure your child knows that the helmet's going to have to be reevaluated several times during the course of a season to make sure that fit continues. That's probably the most important. If it's not a new helmet, if it's a helmet the kid's been given through the program, If it's not new, make sure that it's been recently reconditioned and recertified. That means it's been through a program, been retested, been made to perform like it was when it was new. Those are very important when it comes to helmets that you receive from somebody else.
Is that something that parents can request from the school?
Absolutely. I think you ask the school or the coach up front, what's your program? What's your reconditioning, recertification program? Most schools, the good news is most schools have a program. They either do them every year, or they do them every other year, or they have some cycling program where they get them done on a regular basis. And if your kid has a helmet, you want to know, you can easily look inside the helmet. If a helmet's been recertified, there'll be a label inside the helmet under the pads that gives you the year that was last recertified, and they'll give you the name of the company that did the recertification. And that year, that date should be within 2 years of the date you're going to be using it. If not, go back to the coach and say, I want a helmet that's been recertified sooner than this.
Are there any final tips you want to give to parents or kids who are watching about how to prevent those concussions?
Make sure you know what the symptoms of concussions are. They can be everything from headaches to balance issues, vision, memory, those kinds of things. So if a player has those symptoms, that they tell somebody. You know, the good news is most concussions are not serious. Most concussions are transient. The symptoms resolve fairly quickly. But if you don't tell somebody and you continue to play and you have a concussion, you're really placing yourself at increased risk. So all that information is available, and you can download it from our website at noxie.org. You can go to the CDC website where we have a program called Heads Up for Parents that Noxie underwrote. It's got all of this information. You can even get it on a smartphone app from the CDC website. And then finally, we've put all this information together at a single source at videopump.tv.
That's great. Thanks so much for joining us, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Tiffany.
So let's summarize then. Both equipment and playing field standards are set by consortia. What that means is they're not NANSI standards. It is true that ASTM and CSA Group are following a national consensus process. Very often, you often hear us speaking about regulatory documents, consortia documents, and consortia documents are ones that don't follow the more rigorous requirements for balance and access and relief. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not relief, but appeal. Very often, it's a much less rigorous process because the technology needs to move quickly. So we have to be respectful that not everything and not every technology in the United States has to be run through an ANSI accredited committee. What do you have? A facility standard by SCC. Okay, so the facility standards, the actual built environment, they're set by organizations that we deal with more commonly. Regulatory standards set principally in the interest of public safety. Finally, once again, the user-owner final fiduciary is a weak voice. It's not unlike all other standards that we track. That's part of the reason we're here, is that large organizations like the University of Michigan will often have their own enforcement group, and those enforcement groups are essentially in service of public safety. And very often they're very close to things that, when things go bad, the enforcement are usually there and they're usually fingered as the responsible party. But in many cases, I think they're not to blame. And so that's why they will tend to err on the side of safety at the cost of economy. And we always have this problem of being respectful of the expertise of our enforcement and our conformity assessment professionals, while at the same time, how can we ration our resources? Because if we did everything every inspector and a conformity assessment and enforcer and compliance officer required of us, we probably couldn't be in business. So it's always this difficulty we have, and but the more stakeholders are at these meetings, and I'm understanding that ASTM has about 800 people going to their football, was it FO8? I believe that it's quite an event. Go to our website to get more about it, to learn more about it. So that's why we're here, and I guess what I'd like to do is to ask anything else. Any thoughts here? I know we don't have an audience like we thought we would, as I'd like to remind people that we are We're a little bit rough today in our production, but that is to be expected. We're out and doing things on campus the way we like to do it. I don't like us to be too much isolated on campus. The sound studio is wonderful for great productions, but I don't think there's any substitute for getting out into the mix of what we're actually doing. So this is actually a live picture, and you should be able to see some maize and blue. You should be able to see some umbrellas going by. It looks like it's getting quite a bit more rainier out there. So with that, I guess we're ready to close the call. I'm going to remind everyone that how you observe today is probably important to us all. So I'll leave this as it stands, and I think it speaks for itself. Thanks very much for your time, Christine, and we will see you next week. And I'll remind everyone that we will be having Joe Bhatia come by in a couple weeks, and all of you are welcome to join us live stream then. Anything else I missed, Christine?
No, I think that's about it.
Yeah?
Just the RSVP can be sent to my email address at ch.
Yeah, that's good.
ASF@umu.edu. If you'd like to find us on the.
Yeah, so here's our event, and Christine is somewhere here. Where's the RSVP? Where is our RSVP? I thought, oh, here we are. Okay, so here's our welcome, Tim. Here's Christine, and she'll be helping Tracy. Remember, everyone remembers Tracy from last year, and Jim has been with us for a few years also. So I guess that's where we want to leave us. I do think it's probably appropriate to leave us here. Thanks very much, Jim.